Hey guys, my name is Blaze and welcome back to my ongoing action RPG series. Now before we get into this video, I just want to give everybody that's watching this series a heads up. I am planning to start, or rather I will be starting a Patreon campaign real soon. And once I do, I will upload a video, but obviously it's something optional. You do get rewards for it. There's going to be some extra stuff. And I will explain everything in a separate announcement video. But in this one here, what we've got is we have left and right movement, we've got our colliding. I took away the slime that we had before, but in this one, we are going to learn how to shoot bullets. Yes, we are doing ranged attacks in this video. Unfortunately though, this is like the fourth or fifth take that I've made of this, and so I kind of given up having to rewrite the same code 5 times in a row. So I've pre-written all the code, I've left all the code pre-written. I'm just going to explain everything now. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a couple of new things. Make sure you have a sprite for your bullet. I'm just using my collider small here, which is the same collider as my slime, funnily enough. But you should have your own sprite. And at this stage, we're going to keep the visuals to a minimum so that we can keep the programming as our focus. And we're going to need to update our macros, our get input, move collide, and we have a new script here called state ranged attack, which operates differently to state idle. But don't worry, I will be explaining everything. We also have a new object here, which is parent projectile, and we're going to have to make some changes to object player. Remember, all of this is for ranged attacks, and melee attacks are slightly similar, with the exception of maybe one or two things, at least at a beginner's level. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to need to do is add a couple new macros. So our first macro here is ranged attack, and I've set that to be an action. So ranged attack is basically, well, a new action that we're going to do. And if you remember from the previous videos, we set up our directions and actions to be separate to each other. Keep in mind all the people that have macros for left and right as two separate things. Yours is going to look slightly different, but don't worry, I will do my best to explain it. And as a side note, I do want to note that if you can hear the fan in the background, that is my laptop doing its best to keep up. Essentially record all this and, well, record my voice at the same time. I removed the face cam. I know a lot of people kind of enjoyed that, but I had to get rid of it just so that I could save on performance and so that GameMaker wouldn't crash or OBS wouldn't crash. So let me just check my time. 3 minutes, good. Excellent. Okay, so our next macro here is cell. I called it cell because my collider cell here, has a value of 32 for width and height. And that's exactly what our cell is here. So our cell here is 32 as well. And you can see there in the comment there, I've set it to be my offset. Why didn't I just call it offset? That's a very good question, and I don't know the answer to that myself. But essentially, our cell value here is 32. You can change that value to whatever you want. So let's just say that you want a cell value to be 16 or I don't know, 48, 64, 128, whatever cell size you're working with or whatever kind of offset or basic offset you want, then that's what you can do. You can set that to whatever number you want. My personal tip for you guys is to make sure that it is a power of 2 value. So that's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, and above. I don't think you need to go any higher than 64, but just in case. So mine, I've chosen 32. You can choose whatever cell size you want or whatever offset value you want. In fact, you can even just call it offset and bypass all of this explanation, which I probably wasted a lot more time than I needed to. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to create our parent projectile. And I've chosen the sprite to be collider small. Actually, let's make it interesting. let's make sure that you shoot slimes instead. And you have to make sure that it's optional, but I want to get you guys into the habit of setting collider masks or collision masks. The reason is because in a lot of other games, people won't use the visuals as their collisions as well. They kind of do that separately. And that's what I want you guys to get into the habit of doing. But let's keep moving with the game, or with the programming, or rather you guys will be programming. I'm just explaining everything. And we are going to create this new parent object, which is going to be the parent of all the projectiles in our game. So what we're going to need is we're going to need a speed variable. I'm pretty sure I don't need to explain that, considering that our player object already uses that. So that's something to keep in mind. And we're going to have these two new variables here, which are x direction and y direction. Now basically what these are, they're going to essentially be the direction that we're going to be moving, either up, down, left, or right. And that will become clear as I go through this video. But just keep these two values in mind here for the player, for the projectile object. And in the step event here, we have two local variables. We have a local variable x and y. They essentially work the same way, but we are going to take the sign value of x direction and y direction respectively and multiply them by speed. Now, basically, if you've forgotten, sign gives us a value of -1, 0, or +1, depending on whatever values in here. And again, this will change later, so just keep that in mind. And then we have here move collide. If you've been following the series from video 1 through to now, then you'll know that we created this script a while ago. In this case, however, I have a new value here, which I have set to true. I will get to that in a second, but let's see what these two here do first. First, we're going to input the local variable x and y as our x direction and y direction. We're going to check for collisions with anything that is related to object collision. And this true value, what it actually does is it will check to see if it is it's a Boolean, really. And down here, after we do collision checking and if we stop moving and everything, we are going to check to see if we need to destroy it. And if it is set to true, such as in this case, it is set to true for bullets, we are going to destroy whatever called the script. So in this case here, seeing as our bullet here, whenever it collides with something, it's set to true, and if it is, we're going to destroy the bullet. If it's set to false, then obviously nothing's going to happen. But that's pretty much all that there is. Now let's focus on this move and collide script for a second here. The only additions that I've made here are the check to see if we need to destroy the object when it collides with something, and then of course make those checks along the X and along the Y collision checks. So make sure that you put these extra lines in after you stop moving and before you actually make any applications to it. So make sure it's within the place meeting code block here. Otherwise, you're going to get errors and it's not going to work properly. It's still going to work, but not the way that you want it to. So that's all for now for the parent projectile. The next thing that we're going to do is have a look at Object Player. Now, Object Player probably has the biggest changes here, apart from the new script, but we will get to that last. Now, the player object here has 3 new variables here, which are can attack to see if I'm pretty sure that's self-explanatory, if we can attack or not, and X offset and Y offset. Now remember, I created that new macro called cell, and I labeled it as an offset. I will be using it as an actual cell value a little later on, but this is just an offset for now. Now, these are the 3 new variables here, but down here we need to create some new entries in our 2D array for our new action. And in this case, we have ranged attack as our new action. Of course, if you guys are using the left and right as two separate things, you're obviously not going to have a horizontal. You'll have left, idle, move, and ranged attack, and right, idle, move, and ranged attack. So make sure that you take those differences into account and you check them. Now, our first thing, before I even get into the step and animation and events, I want to check these first. So here we have state idle. And the first thing that we're going to do is get input. We have some new things here, and that is our attack. We're going to check to see if we have pressed, not released, and not if we're holding the key down, but if we've pressed VK space. And going back, if we have pressed it, if we have attacked, then we're going to reset our animation. Why do I want to reset the animation? This is actually very important to this particular method of creating our attacks. So just something to keep in mind. And then in our state here, we're going to change the state to state ranged attack. Everything else remains the same. Of course, with move collide down here at the bottom, we need to make sure that we don't actually die when we collide with something. So we need to make sure that we add in that false statement or the false value down at the bottom. So just keep that in mind. And back to the attack part. So once we've pressed the key and we change our state to state range attack, we're going to do this. And the first thing that we're going to do is change our action to range attack. So it will play the animation as soon as we enter the actual value here. So once we start doing melee, we're pretty much going to do something like this. And instead of action, it's obviously going to be melee attack. But maybe you only have range attacks in your game. I'm not sure what you guys plan to do. But essentially, we're going to change our action, and that will therefore change the animation. We're also going to set two new local variables here, which are x offset and y offset. Remember, the x offset and the y offset were created back here in the players event here. Players create event, we had an x offset and a y offset. And so when we attack, we are actually going to input those values into this script. And then we're going to check to see if the floor value, so our value rounded down of our image index, and our image index is basically where we are in the animation. If the floor value of that is greater than 2, or whatever number you really want to use, then we are going to check to see if an instance doesn't exist. Remember, the exclamation mark here in programming means not. So if there isn't already a projectile in the room, and if we can attack, then we have to set the can attack value to false. And with, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but let me just read this out for you and I will explain what with does. So with instance create depth x plus our local variable x, our y plus local variable y, 0, which is our depth on the layer, and what we are going to create. Now what with does is it actually does whatever is inside of the brackets first. So in this case, we are going to create an object. We're going to create an instance of parent projectile. And we are going to tell it to say, hey, your x direction and your y direction are now going to be the x offset and the y offset that I've fed in. Now here's the thing. I could just say x offset and y offset, but that will actually throw an error because it will try to find an x offset and a y offset inside of this instance here, which doesn't work. So what we need to do is we need to have these two variables here, these two local variables, and we need to feed them into the parent projectiles x direction and y direction, right? Now, assuming you have understood all of that and my explanation so far, and I'm reaching 15 minutes, so let me just quickly explain everything else. Let's go back to the actual player events. So we've created our instance, and we're feeding an X offset and a Y offset, but where do we actually get those from? These get updated in the step event. And here we have a switch statement. Now I just want to keep this brief, but essentially a switch statement is a faster version of if statements. Just to keep it simple. They're an alternative to use. So that's just something you want to keep in mind. Now, in a switch statement, you need to have your value that you're going to check. So in this case, we are going to have direction. And if we're moving left or right, our X offset will equal either 32, which is our cell value, if we're moving right, or negative 32, which is our cell value when we are moving left. If we're moving up, then we have to have, well, 0 on our X because we don't want it to be moving diagonally, but we are going to have a cell offset of negative 32 because negative is upwards in GameMaker Studio. And for down, we're going to have positive 32 or positive cell value here. Now keep in mind that whenever I have a case here, I have a break afterwards. Basically, it's kind of like how these brackets work. These curly braces, they work as these break statements, but make sure that the case here ends at the break. That's basically it. So whenever you have a case, if you only want to run whatever's in here, then make sure you have a break afterwards. To be safe, just write case, whatever case you want, and then break afterward, just to be safe. And then finally, seeing as we change our action to ranged attack, we need to kind of do some things first. So at the end of our animation, we have another switch statement. So whenever an animation ends, we need to do something here with our player object. So in this case, I'm checking my actions. So after an action animation ends, we're going to do some things and then do whatever you want. So in the case of idle and move, I do nothing. And then I have a break. I break out of these two cases. And in the case of ranged attack, I'm going to change my state back to state idle, and I'm going to set my can attack to true. Remember that in the ranged attack state, we are setting our can attack to false. So that's just something that you want to do at the end of your animation, not during. And that's pretty much it. So assuming you've followed everything and I haven't missed anything, which I'm pretty sure I haven't, then we're done. You've essentially animated or you haven't animated, but you've programmed your ranged attack code. So this is the result of everything. Okay, just give it 3, 2, 1, and let's check our results. So you can move left and right, up and down, and when you press space, I do remember we changed our object to a slime, and that's pretty much it. So I know this is probably going to be the only time where I've pre-written code, so I'm not sure if you guys will appreciate that. I just didn't want to have to rewrite all this code and do explanations for them, because doing ranged attacks or doing attacks in general is quite a tedious process. So I didn't want to have to rewrite all that extra code while explaining them at the same time. And so if you guys, I'm pretty sure you will have questions, especially with the switch statements. So if you guys have questions, if you get errors, then post them into the comment section below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications. You need them. But for now, this will be the only time where hopefully this will be the only time where this has happened, and hopefully in the next video I can put the face cam back in. I know a lot of people really liked having face cam. I'm just not sure my roommate will appreciate it, which is kind of a concern at the moment. But that's all from now. In the next video, we're going to do a little bit more work on the range attack so that we can add some complexity to the game. But for now, that's all from me. Hopefully you learned something. Again, if you have any questions or comments, get any errors, then ask them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, watch out for the next video, guys. I'll see you all later. Bye.